Over the years, human rights groups all over the world have actively documented and brought to public attention warning signs of fundamentalist attacks against women. These include restrictions on the appearance of women in public places, the imposition of dress codes to justify or promote nationalism and cultural pride in adherence to a faith-based code of conduct. I went to a South Asian country twice last year, my chancellor knows this, to evaluate a community-based adolescent reproductive health project. I documented a case of a young girl who received 50 lashes for bathing in a beach that is designated for foreign tourists. In these remote villages, girls have to fully cover their head, face, and body at all times, especially when they go to public places. And they can only go out of their houses during designated times of the day. According to the Women's Human Rights Network, many girls in remote areas in West and South Asia are kept out of school, denied basic education in order to remain faithful to their ideal norms of femininity. In countries that now experience fundamentalist backlash, family laws are either amended or promulgated, putting women, especially mothers and adolescent girls, at a disadvantaged position. There is also a relentless campaign to restrict women's reproductive health and choices and access to information. For example, some faith-based groups in our country have actively worked against the access of couples to the use of condoms on claims that these are used to promote abortion. While in other countries, there is a tendency to revalorize such cultural practices as female genital mutilation, stoning women for so-called immodest conduct, domestic violence, and the like. At the moment, our effort to uphold the constitutional provision of gender equality and implement the laws protecting women from harm and discrimination are hampered by the following developments. There is resistance from some faith-based organizations against bills and local policies that provide especially women full access to reproductive health information and services. The Human Rights Watch report that in 2003, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines successfully blocked legislation that would have authorized the use of national funds for condoms and other contraceptive supplies. In that same year, the national government purportedly gave 850 million pesos to a religious organization to promote nothing but natural family planning, which ironically is also a form of pregnancy prevention, just like the use of condom and other family planning devices. Since the 11th Congress, or more than a decade ago, progressive legislators have repeatedly submitted various versions of bills that aim to promote reproductive health, responsible parenthood, and population management. There have been moves to sanction or restrict educators, media practitioners, and medical health providers from providing sexuality and education, information, and services. There is constant shaming of legislators who endorse and support bills on reproductive health and population development through pastoral letters. In some schools, teachers are warned not to discuss reproductive health and sexuality topics, as it can cause the termination of their contracts. A film dialogue organized by an all-women college on sexuality and reproductive health was canceled because of pressure from the so-called pro-life supporters when they learned that the reproductive health doctor was the resource speaker. There is documentation about public officials who insist on restricting people's access to family planning and related services, and in doing so contradict and violate existing government policies and commitments to international human rights covenants. On the other hand, there are also reports about people denied communion by their church because they publicly espouse reproductive rights principles. We have also collected information about NGO-operated RH clinics that were driven to closure because of harassment from advocates of church positions on reproductive health. These organizations are present at the moment. There are numerous anecdotal reports of women who were pressured to abandon the reproductive health care option, or worse, denied their entitlement to humane medical treatment for complications arising from abortion. In Malitbog, Bukidnon, 12 women were forced to have their IUDs removed for fear of being excommunicated by the Archdiocese of Cagayan de Oro. But what is most disturbing is the dissemination of incomplete or wrong information about the efficacy of modern contraceptives. A good example is the totalizing and unqualified claim that condoms cannot prevent HIV virus transmission. Even as we affirm today the fundamental human rights of individuals, we have to face some hard facts about our country. One, fundamental human rights of freedom of expression and exercise of religious beliefs are being curtailed. Two, empirical data show the following. 61% of currently married women do not want to have additional children. The desired fertility rate of Filipino women is 2.5 children. However, current fertility rate is 3.5 children because of the lack of information and absence of adequate family planning services. The proportion of unwanted births increased from 18% in 1998 to 20% in 2003. Women who are poor and with least education have 2 to 3 times more children than those who are economically better off and with higher education. Poor women have the least access to reproductive health information and services. The Philippines continues to be one of the Asian countries with a very, very high rate of maternal mortality. I just came from New York and we sadly had to report about this. 97% of all Filipinos believe it is important to have the ability to control one's fertility or plan one's family. It is significant to note that 82% of the respondents are Roman Catholic. Contrary to claims that access to reproductive and sexuality information promotes promiscuity and abortion, research by UNFPA shows that reproductive health education leads to responsible behavior, higher levels of abstinence, later initiation to sexuality, higher use of contraception, and fewer sexual partners. This is what empirical evidence tells us. What can we do then to challenge fundamentalisms? We need to uphold at all times the constitutional provision of the separation of the church and the state. We have to insist on the use of scientific evidence for policy and program review and development. Allow me to add at this point that the World Health Organization and various medical and health groups worldwide have defined oral, injectable, hormonal, and intrauterine devices as contraceptives. The function of this is to prevent pregnancy, and thus they cannot be categorized as abortifacients, which is, of course, used for the purpose of terminating pregnancy. We have to make the state accountable, our government accountable, for ensuring that the fundamental human rights of all citizens, especially women and other marginalized groups, are respected, protected, promoted, and fulfilled. I end my presentation with a resounding call for all of us to defend the tradition of secular and scientific discourse. As a feminist UP professor, I affirm the need to continue the academic pursuit of relevant and meaningful scholarship, to bravely challenge old and emerging expressions of obscurantisms, even as we also humbly submit ourselves to the regular scrutiny of our peers, even as we interrogate our own subjectivities and standpoints. Magandang hapon po, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy and honored to be here marking and celebrating the centennial of the University of the Philippines with all of you. Well, religion has always been a highly political affair. The formal separation of religion and politics in the form of the secular state is a recent historical phenomenon. The feudal state of Western Europe, with Christianity as its state ideology, subsequently imposed this on the populations that it enslaved through colonial conquests. Women's bodies, or the Christian need to cover them up, and the control of female sexuality was a big part of the civilization of the natives, so-called. The justification for colonial conquests was the thoroughly racist notion of the superiority of Western civilizations over those of the native populations. The fundamental purpose, or the fundamental political purpose, of the clash of civilization ideologies then, as today, was the building of empire